Tonight, a blow to President Trump from the Republican-led Senate.
The yeas are 81, the nays are 13.
The first override of a Trump veto as senators saved a $741 billion defense bill the president had blocked.
The objection to the President of the United States to the contrary notwithstanding.
But Mr. Trump's fury over losing the election is erupting with more conflict inside his party. A Twitter assault on Senator John Thune, who said Biden's win will not be overturned. So the president urged South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem to run against him, while stoking expectations for his supporters by promoting a big protest rally in Washington, D.C., January 6th. That day, Vice President Mike Pence must preside over the final counting of electoral votes. But he's fighting off a lawsuit that seeks to give Pence power to toss out some states' votes, enough to flip Biden's victory to Trump. Government lawyers defending Pence belittled the claim for suing, ironically, the very person whose power they seek to promote. Making this all the more awkward, the suit was filed by a group of Trump loyalists, including a Texas congressman, against the vice president, who is widely viewed as unfailingly loyal to President Trump.
All right, people, welcome back to Dr. John Podcast. Jack Smith's criminal cases against Trump are dead for now, but the special counsel has not conceded defeat. Instead, he's fired a warning shot aimed at the soul of American justice. The fight for the rule of law is only beginning, even as Trump walks away without facing trial. The journey that led to this moment began with the appointment of a special counsel who was supposed to restore public confidence in the Justice Department's ability to investigate powerful figures without fear or favor. Jack Smith, a career prosecutor with decades of experience and a reputation for integrity, was given the unenviable task of examining whether a former president had committed crimes in his efforts to overturn a democratic election and in his handling of the nation's most sensitive secrets.
The United States Senate has delivered a major rebuke to Donald Trump in the final weeks of his presidency. Republican and Democrat senators united to override the president's veto of a major defense bill. The vote passed by more than the required two-thirds majority and follows a similar bipartisan motion in the House of Representatives. It's the first time Congress has overridden a Trump veto. The move unlocks more than $700 billion worth of military spending. Straight to DW correspondent Oliver Salet in Washington. Welcome, Oliver. What's the significance of Congress's move?
Well, it's certainly a humiliating blow, Phil, because simply it has never happened since Donald Trump took office that Senate and Congress overrode such a veto of Donald Trump. And it's in particular, it's interesting and important because we have to remind our viewers that the Senate is held by the Republicans. So the Republicans hold a majority in Senate, the party of Donald Trump, of course. And we've seen some extremely partisan politics throughout Donald Trump's presidency. If you just think back of the impeachment proceedings where a lot of evidence was produced, damaging evidence against Donald Trump.
Smith approached this assignment with the meticulous thoroughness that had defined his career, assembling a team of experienced attorneys and investigators who would leave no stone unturned. The evidence they uncovered was devastating, painting a picture of a president who had pushed the boundaries of lawful behavior to their breaking point and beyond. The indictments that followed were not the product of partisan animus, but of professional judgment, charges that any reasonable prosecutor would have brought given the weight of the evidence. The election case was the most consequential, striking at the heart of American democracy. Smith charged Trump with multiple crimes related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, including conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, and obstruction of an official proceeding. The evidence gathered by Smith's team documented a relentless pressure campaign directed at state officials to overturn legitimate election results. There was a scheme to submit fake slates of electors to Congress.
But the Republicans in Senate decided to back him to exonerate Donald Trump in the end. So now we've seen a different motion here. The Senate approved of a defense budget that actually is now against Donald Trump's will, and that also challenges Donald Trump's plan plans to pull out 12,000 of the currently 36,000 troops that are stationed in Germany. Donald Trump wanted to pull those troops out of Germany, and that plan is effectively put on hold now. So another blow that comes with this decision of Senate. The big question is really now, what does that mean for the Republican Party? What happens to the Republican Party? And are we seeing the support that the Republican Party has given Donald Trump? Are we seeing that crumble now?
And where does this put us before the upcoming runoffs in the state of Georgia?
Well, the runoffs in Georgia, Phil, are part of the election that took place on November 3rd. And as you know, a part of the Senate seats were up for grabs in that presidential election as well.
There were attempts to pressure the Justice Department to endorse false claims of election fraud. There was inflammatory rhetoric that culminated in the violent attack on the Capitol. The case against Trump was not built on speculation or political bias, but on documentary evidence, witness testimony, and the president's own public statements. It was a case that any fair-minded observer would recognize as serious and substantial. The classified documents case was equally troubling, involving the removal of sensitive national security materials from the White House and their storage at a private residence. Trump had taken boxes of classified documents, some bearing the highest levels of secrecy, to Mar-a-Lago, where they were kept in unsecured locations accessible to people without security clearances. When the National Archives and the Justice Department sought to recover these materials, Trump allegedly obstructed their efforts, failing to return all the documents and even suggesting that his lawyers make false representations to investigators.
And there are two very decisive seats that are up for a runoff election here, in fact, and those were needed to determine the majority in Senate. And they were too close to call. And those seats are very crucial because they decide who controls the Senate in the next presidency, in Joe Biden's presidency. The Democrats will have to win two seats that are up for grabs there in order to be able to have a powerful presidency. So, and also another hurdle is that it's a Republican stronghold, of course, in Georgia. So a difficult task, a difficult undertaking. And Joe Biden needs that victory if he wants to undo certain Trump policies, be it migration or simply America's role in the world, undoing Donald Trump's America First policy. So it's all about the question, will Joe Biden be able to be a successful president, a powerful president, or will the Republicans in Senate be able to obstruct him by the time he takes office?
Okay, Oliver, thank you. Oliver Salas in Washington.
This was not a technical violation or a minor bureaucratic infraction. This was the mishandling of information that, if compromised, could endanger national security. The case against Trump on these charges was built on physical evidence, on the documents themselves, and on the testimony of those who had witnessed his conduct. The legal machinery that was supposed to bring Trump to justice began to move, with court dates scheduled and trial preparations underway. But then something happened that changed everything. The United States Supreme Court issued a ruling on presidential immunity that fundamentally altered the legal landscape. The court held that presidents enjoy broad immunity for their official acts, a protection that extends to conduct that would otherwise be criminal if undertaken in the course of official duties. This ruling created a shield around Trump that made prosecution significantly more difficult. Suddenly, the legal team had to distinguish between official acts for which Trump was immune and personal acts for which he could be held accountable. This was not an easy distinction to make, as many of Trump's actions fell into a gray area where the line between official and personal was blurred. The immunity ruling forced Smith to refile the election case, narrowing its scope to focus on conduct that was clearly outside the bounds of official duties. The legal arguments that followed were complex and technical, with both sides battling over which aspects of Trump's behavior were protected and which could be prosecuted. But before these issues could be fully resolved, the political landscape shifted in a way that no one had anticipated. Trump won the presidential election in November 2024, securing a return to the office he had lost 4 years earlier. This victory transformed his legal status from that of a private citizen facing criminal charges to that of a president-elect and then a sitting president, a transformation that carried profound legal implications under long-standing Department of Justice policy. The policy of the Department of Justice against prosecuting a sitting president is not a recent invention or a partisan maneuver. It is a principle that has been recognized by administrations of both parties, rooted in the practical understanding that a sitting president cannot effectively discharge the duties of office while also defending against criminal prosecution. The president is the chief executive, the commander-in-chief, the head of state, and the daily demands of that office cannot be reconciled with the demands of a criminal trial. The policy reflects a judgment about the functioning of the government rather than a determination about the innocence or guilt of any particular president. It is a policy that has existed for decades, and it is the policy that the Justice Department followed in the case of Donald Trump once he became president again. The combination of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling and the DOJ policy against prosecuting sitting presidents created an insurmountable barrier to proceeding with the criminal cases. Smith had no choice but to ask that the cases be dismissed, and he did so with a crucial legal distinction. The dismissals he sought were without prejudice, a term that means the cases are not being thrown out because the government lacks evidence or because Trump is innocent. They are being dismissed because of procedural and policy constraints that prevent prosecution at this time. The without prejudice designation leaves open the possibility that the cases could be refiled after Trump leaves office, assuming that the legal and political circumstances at that time would permit prosecution. It is not a final resolution, but a temporary pause, a suspension rather than an ending. The dismissal of the election interference case was particularly significant as it represented the collapse of the most serious prosecution ever brought against a former American president. The evidence that Smith had assembled, the years of work that his team had invested, and the legal arguments that had been developed all came to nothing in terms of holding Trump accountable while he held power. The charges that Smith had brought with such confidence and conviction were now gone, erased from the active docket by the operation of legal principles that had been established long before Trump ever entered politics. The dismissal was not a vindication of Trump's conduct, but a recognition that the system of laws that governs the nation does not permit the prosecution of a sitting president. The classified documents case met an even more ignominious fate. The judge assigned to the case, who had been appointed by Trump, had already expressed skepticism about the prosecution's legal theories and had raised questions about the validity of Smith's appointment as special counsel. In a ruling that sent shockwaves through the legal community, she held that Smith's appointment was unconstitutional, effectively gutting the case against Trump on procedural grounds. Smith appealed this ruling, but the legal battle that would have followed was lengthy and uncertain. After Trump won the election, the Justice Department determined that continuing the appeal was not in the best interests of the government, given the DOJ policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. The appeal was dropped, and the classified documents case was dismissed entirely, joining the election case in legal limbo. The dismissal of these cases leaves the nation in a paradoxical position. The person who was accused of the most serious crimes ever alleged against a president has not been prosecuted. The evidence that Smith assembled, the witnesses he interviewed, the documents he examined, all of it is now sitting in files that are likely to remain unopened for years. Trump has been effectively protected from criminal accountability by the operation of legal doctrines and institutional policies that were designed to ensure the smooth functioning of government. The protections that exist for a reason, to prevent the presidency from being paralyzed by prosecution, have in this case shielded a president from facing justice for conduct that many view as deeply criminal. The person at the center of this legal drama, Jack Smith, is no longer serving as special counsel, but he has not disappeared from public view. In a remarkable series of public statements and interviews, Smith has warned the nation about the dangers that he believes the rule of law now faces. He has expressed deep concern about what he sees as an attack on the legal system, an attack that he attributes to the very person he was appointed to investigate. Smith has made it clear that he is not making these warnings lightly and that he is motivated by a genuine fear for the future of American justice. The man who was supposed to prosecute Trump has become a prophet of doom, warning that the legal system itself is under threat and that the forces that shielded Trump from prosecution could be used to punish those who dared to challenge his power. Smith's warnings about potential retaliation are particularly chilling. He has acknowledged that Trump could potentially use the prosecutorial power of the Justice Department against those who investigated him, including Smith himself. This is not a fanciful concern, but a realistic possibility, given the history of the Trump administration and the president's well-documented desire for revenge against his perceived enemies. If Trump were to order the Justice Department to investigate and prosecute Jack Smith, it would represent an unprecedented attack on the rule of law, a clear effort to use the power of the government to punish a prosecutor for doing his job. Smith has raised this possibility publicly, not as a prediction, but as a warning, an attempt to alert the American people to the dangers that he sees. The broader significance of Smith's warnings extends beyond his personal concerns. He is speaking to a fundamental question about the nature of American democracy and the place of the rule of law in the nation's constitutional order. If presidents can use prosecutorial power as a weapon against political enemies, if the legal system can be manipulated to protect the powerful and punish the powerless, then the rule of law is not a principle, but a convenience, something that exists when it serves those in power and disappears when it does not. Smith's warnings are a call to attention, a plea for the American people to recognize the danger that he believes the country faces. The fact that a career prosecutor with no history of partisanship feels compelled to make these warnings is itself a remarkable development, one that speaks to the depth of his concern. The legal doctrines that have protected Trump, the immunity ruling and the DOJ policy, have complex justifications that are worth examining. The immunity doctrine is rooted in the idea that presidents need to be able to act decisively without constant fear of criminal liability. There is wisdom in this principle, as the presidency would be paralyzed if every action were subject to second-guessing and potential prosecution. But the doctrine as applied by the Supreme Court in Trump's case has been criticized as overly broad, extending immunity to conduct that goes well beyond the core functions of the presidency. The DOJ policy against prosecuting sitting presidents is similarly justified by practical considerations about the functioning of government, but it creates an undeniable shield for presidents who might otherwise face accountability. Both doctrines have a reasonable basis in law and policy, but their application to Trump has raised serious questions about whether they are being used to protect a president who may have committed serious crimes. The political implications of the dismissed cases are far-reaching, affecting the 2026 midterm elections and beyond. Trump's opponents had hoped that the criminal cases would provide a check on his power, a mechanism for accountability that could constrain his behavior and demonstrate that no one is above the law. The dismissal of the cases removes that check, at least for now, and allows Trump to claim vindication even though he has never been found innocent. His supporters have seized on the dismissals as evidence that the prosecutions were politically motivated, a weaponization of the legal system against a political opponent. The truth is more complex, as the cases were based on evidence and brought by a prosecutor with a strong record of impartiality. But the perception that the cases were unfair, whether or not that perception is accurate, has become a political reality that Trump is exploiting to his advantage. The dismissed cases also have implications for the future of presidential power, as the immunity doctrine and the DOJ policy create a legal framework that could protect future presidents from accountability in ways that were not previously anticipated. The Supreme Court's ruling on immunity has been described by some legal scholars as a significant expansion of presidential power, one that could have consequences far beyond the Trump case. The DOJ policy, while long-standing, has never been tested in the way it has been tested during Trump's tenure, with a president facing serious criminal charges and then returning to power to escape prosecution. The combination of these doctrines and policies has created a situation where a president facing criminal charges can effectively escape them by winning re-election, a possibility that undermines the principle that no one is above the law. The role of the courts in the legal drama has been varied, with some rulings aiding Trump and others constraining him. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling was a major victory for Trump, providing the legal basis for the dismissal of the election case. Judge Cannon's ruling on the classified documents case was similarly favorable to Trump, striking down the prosecution on procedural grounds. But other courts have been less accommodating, with judges at the district and appellate levels ruling against Trump on various legal issues. The mixed results of the litigation reflect the complexity of the legal questions involved and the difficulty of navigating the intersection of criminal law and presidential power. The courts have not uniformly protected Trump, nor have they uniformly constrained him. The legal system has been a battleground, with each side winning some victories and suffering some defeats. The evidence that Jack Smith assembled remains a matter of public record, even if the cases have been dismissed. The indictments, the court filings, the legal briefs, all of these documents provide a detailed account of the allegations against Trump and the evidence that Smith believes supported them. This evidence will continue to be available to historians, scholars, and the public, providing a record of the conduct that was alleged. The fact that the cases were dismissed does not erase the evidence or the allegations. It simply means that the legal process will not determine whether those allegations are true. The evidence remains, a testament to the seriousness of the charges and the thoroughness of the investigation. The response of Trump and his supporters to the dismissals has been one of celebration, with the president and his allies declaring victory and claiming that the charges were always baseless. This narrative is politically effective, as it allows Trump to frame the legal proceedings as a failed witch hunt rather than a serious prosecution that was thwarted by legal doctrine and institutional policy. The dismissals provide Trump with a talking point that he can use to rally his supporters and to attack his opponents, a claim of vindication that resonates with those who believe the legal system has been weaponized against him. Whether the dismissals are truly a vindication or merely a procedural pause is a question that is being debated by legal experts and political observers. But in the court of public opinion, Trump is presenting them as a complete victory. The future of the dismissed cases remains uncertain, as the without prejudice designation means they could theoretically be refiled after Trump leaves office. This possibility depends on a number of factors, including whether Trump leaves office peacefully, whether the political will exists to prosecute him, and whether the legal doctrines that shield him while in office continue to apply after he leaves. There is no guarantee that the cases will ever be refiled, and the passage of time could make prosecution more difficult, as memories fade and evidence becomes harder to preserve. The fact that the cases remain potentially viable is a source of hope for those who want to see Trump held accountable, but it is not a basis for certainty about what will happen in the future. The legal status of the cases is uncertain, and it is likely to remain so for years to come. The international dimension of the legal drama is worth considering, as the world has watched the American legal system grapple with the question of whether a president can be prosecuted. The dismissal of the cases has been noted by foreign governments who are drawing their own conclusions about the state of American democracy and the strength of American institutions. The perception that a president can escape prosecution for serious crimes, whether or not that perception is accurate, damages America's global reputation and undermines its ability to advocate for the rule of law abroad. The legal drama has provided ammunition to those who are skeptical of American democracy, and it has raised questions about whether the United States can effectively hold its leaders accountable. The constitutional implications of the legal drama extend beyond the specific case of Donald Trump to the broader question of presidential power and accountability. The immunity doctrine and the DOJ policy against prosecuting sitting presidents create a legal framework that protects presidents from criminal liability while in office. But that framework has never been as thoroughly tested as it has been during Trump's tenure. The outcome of the legal proceedings, or the lack thereof, will inform future discussions about the proper balance between executive power and legal accountability. The constitutional questions raised by the Trump cases are likely to be debated for years, as scholars and practitioners grapple with the implications of the decisions that have been made. The role of the Department of Justice in the legal drama has been a subject of controversy, with some critics arguing that the DOJ was too slow to act and too willing to accommodate Trump's legal arguments. The DOJ has defended its actions as consistent with legal doctrine and institutional policy, and there is evidence to support this defense. But the perception that the DOJ has been politicized, that it has protected Trump rather than treating him like any other citizen, is widespread and damaging. The credibility of the DOJ is an essential component of the rule of law, and the erosion of that credibility is a serious concern. The DOJ will need to work to restore public confidence in its impartiality, a task that will be difficult given the political polarization of the current era. The personal toll of the legal drama on Jack Smith and his team should not be overlooked. They dedicated years of their professional lives to building cases that they believed were necessary and just, and those cases have been dismissed without a final determination on the merits. The emotional and psychological impact of this outcome is likely to be significant, even for the most hardened professionals. Smith's public warnings about threats to the rule of law may reflect his personal experience with the legal system, an experience that has been frustrating and disillusioning. The toll on the broader legal profession is also concerning, as prosecutors and attorneys may be discouraged from pursuing cases against powerful figures if they believe those cases will ultimately be dismissed. The relationship between the legal cases and the ongoing political protests is another dimension of the story worth exploring. The protesters who have filled the streets in all 50 states have often cited Trump's immunity from prosecution as a grievance, a sign that the legal system is not treating the president like everyone else. The dismissed cases have become a rallying cry for those who believe the rule of law is under attack, and the protests have amplified the message that Smith has been delivering in his public statements. The legal drama and the political protests are not separate phenomena, but part of a broader crisis of confidence in American institutions, a crisis that is being fueled by the perception that the president is above the law. The role of the vice president in the legal drama has been minimal, but there are potential implications if Trump were to leave office. The vice president's constitutional responsibilities would become central if Trump were unable to serve, and the legal cases against Trump could potentially be revived if he left office. The vice president's position on the legal cases is a matter of speculation, as Vance has not publicly commented on the prosecutions. But the constitutional role of the vice president as successor to the presidency creates a potential interest in the outcome of the legal proceedings, an interest that could become relevant if Trump were to leave office for any reason. The path forward for the dismissed cases is uncertain, but there are several possibilities that observers are considering. One possibility is that the cases will simply remain dismissed, with no effort made to revive them after Trump leaves office. This would be the easiest outcome, as it would avoid the political and legal complications of a new prosecution. Another possibility is that the cases will be refiled after Trump leaves office, with the Justice Department pursuing prosecution based on the evidence that Smith assembled. This would be a legally and politically difficult path, as the passage of time would make prosecution more challenging and the political will to prosecute a former president might be lacking. A third possibility is that the cases will be revived in some modified form, perhaps based on new evidence or new legal theories. The outcome will depend on a range of factors, including the political environment at the time Trump leaves office and the legal doctrines that apply at that time. The broader lesson of the legal drama is about the fragility of the rule of law and the importance of institutional safeguards. The legal system that was supposed to hold Trump accountable has been tested to its limits, and in many respects it has failed. The immunity doctrine, the DOJ policy, the court rulings, all of these have served to protect Trump from prosecution, even though the evidence against him is substantial. The failure of the legal system to bring Trump to justice is a warning about the vulnerability of American democracy, a reminder that the rule of law requires constant vigilance and that institutional checks can be neutralized by determined leaders. The future of American democracy may depend on whether the lessons of the legal drama are learned and whether the institutions are strengthened to meet the challenges ahead.